Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. And greetings to our live virtual audience watching on Zoom, whatever time of day or night it might be in your neck of the woods. I'm Mark Tomelko, Communications Director at the Center for Decision Research at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. On behalf of the co-sponsors of tonight's event, WBEZ Chicago, the Center for Decision Research, and Mindworks, welcome to our conversation with Richard Thaler and Greta Johnsen. A few quick introductory notes before we turn things over to Richard and Greta. First, at the conclusion of the event, we'll announce one lucky winner, 2 tickets to a live taping of WBEZ's show, Wait, Don't Tell Me. You need to be in attendance to claim your prize, so please stay seated at the end for a moment and we'll announce the winner. Programs like tonight are made possible in part by folks just like you. WBEZ is grateful for its generous community of listeners who help sustain Chicago Public Media's mission, providing in-depth, original reporting and programming that have the power to inform, engage, and improve the lives of people in our communities. You can become a member at wbez.org/donate. The Center for Decision Research at Chicago Booth has been around since 1977 and owes much of its growth and visibility to Richard Thaler, who served as the faculty director for nearly 20 years. The center's work operates on 3 main fronts. We conduct world-class behavioral science research, we mentor the next generation of scholars and practitioners, and we serve as an intellectual hub for behavioral science, including, I want to note, our free public lecture series, Think Better, which returns next year with Yale's Laurie Santos and Harvard's Steven Pinker. To learn more, you can sign up for our newsletter at chicagobooth.edu/CDR. The center's new public space, Mindworks, continues and expands this work. Conceived by faculty at the CDR and made possible by generous philanthropic support from PIMCO, Mindworks is the world's first lab and discovery center dedicated to behavioral science. Located right across from the Art Institute, Mindworks takes the findings, applications, and research of behavioral science out of the ivory tower and into the everyday world where people live, work, and play. Mindworks is free and open to everyone and is fast becoming one of Chicago's can't-miss destinations. In the 10 months we've been open, we've welcomed more than 10,000 visitors from around the world. That includes 6 continents, so if you have guests visiting this summer from Antarctica, 224 South Michigan. At Mindworks, we are growing and expanding the participant pool for behavioral science research to create robust, replicable data. And we're also giving people aha moments as they learn how to apply insights from behavioral science to better understand and improve their lives and communities. We hope you'll share this space with your networks and invite them to help make science happen. You can learn more at our website, mindworkschicago.org. Now, I'm honored to introduce tonight's speakers, 2 of Chicago's most influential voices. Greta Johnsen is the host of the WBEZ podcast, Nerdette. According to the website Listen Notes, Nerdette is globally ranked in the top 0.1% of all podcasts. Next year, the show will celebrate its 10th anniversary. As the host of Nerdette, as well as live events like tonight's, Greta has interviewed a wide range of luminaries, including Tom Hanks, Margaret Atwood, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Lizzo, before she blew up, Fran Lebowitz, just to name a few. Richard Thaler, when he's not graciously offering his time to talk with audiences like ours, moonlights as the Charles R. Walgreen Distinguished Service Professor of Behavioral Science and Economics at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. He is the 2017 recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economics for his contributions to the field of behavioral economics. His most recent book, Nudge, the final edition, has sold more than 2 million copies. The list of Richard's accomplishments, as well as the profound impact his ideas continue to have on policy and individual lives, is far too large to detail here. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Richard Thaler and Greta Johnsen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Can you hear me okay? Yay, this is super exciting. So, Richard, hi.
Hey,
Thank you
Greta.
for taking the time to do this. I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think so.
I wanted to thank Mark for mentioning where you can donate to WBEZ. Just so y'all know, we are starting our summer pledge drive in just a couple of days. So if you need a reminder of that phone number,
Oh,
it's 888-915-9239. So, Richard, we collected questions from people in attendance here and also online ahead of time. So I've kind of peppered those through our conversation. And I thought we would start with one from Leo in Lincoln Park here in Chicago. Leo wanted to know, what would you say is the difference between the interpretations of psychology and behavioral economics?
Well, behavioral economics is just economists stealing from psychology. So, the difference is behavioral economics involves markets. That's what defines economics. And psychology involves people. And for, a long time, economists had left the people out. And when I was in Stockholm for that prize, I had to give a toast, and I said that I was responsible for discovering humans in a place they had not been seen before, which was the economy.
And can you unpack that a little bit? Because I think, in a lot of ways it comes down to traditional economics kind of prized this extremely rational entity as the person making these decisions, but it ends up being a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, and economists kind of knew that. So economists are fond of making fun of their spouses and students and deans and everybody, basically. And they think all of those people are numbskulls. But the agents, you see, economists don't use the word person. It's an agent. And so the agents in the economy now, those people, they are smart. And in fact, they are as smart as the smartest economist, or possibly even as smart as the smartest economist thinks he is. And so bringing in some real people, we don't think that people are dumb. We just think they're human. And we think the world is hard.
Yeah, the world is hard. Here we are, right? So can you talk a little bit about the idea of choice architecture?
Sure. So when we're making decisions of any kind, it's always in some environment. We were sitting in a conference room, serving as the green room for this event, and we got up to leave, and there's a handle that cries out, "Pull me." In fact, the name of that kind of handle is a pull.
Right. Yeah, it's,
right?
You have to hold it.
And we both
well, you
pulled
did.
it. Oh, yeah. So, well, you watched me do it.
I did watch you do it. I knew.
So, right, that's architecture meets choice architecture.
Yes, that's perfect.
And actually, our old building in London was full of these gigantic poles that you had to push. And we've left that building now, but my contribution was to get them to add push signs. So, and my mantra is, if you want to help people do something, make it easy.
Yes.
Make it easy. That's my 3-word answer to almost every question. So if you want people to push a door that has a big thing like that on it, at least put a sign. It would be better to have a push, but, and there are lots of ways of making life easier, and people just don't think about it.
So I'm curious, so essentially what you're describing is a nudge. Making it easy is that, helpful nudge towards pushing the door when it needs to be pushed or pulling the door when it needs to be pulled, even though the handle may look weird in either sense. can you talk a little bit about the difference then between a nudge and something that is just common sense? Like I think about, brakes in a car or something. Like you wouldn't call that a nudge, right? That's just a thing that cars should have to be able to exist in the world.
Yeah, so no, the brake is just a tool. But, modern cars now beep at you if you get too close to somebody else on the road.
That did happen to me on my way here, actually.
Yeah. And some cars will even brake automatically. But the beep is a nudge. And we've had those for a long time. Many people in this room won't remember that there was a time when cars didn't have seatbelts. And that you had to nudge them to use it. And there was lots of experimentation with how best to do that. There were seatbelts that automatically strangled you as you got into the car. So that wasn't such a good method. And what we've settled on is you have to do it, but if you don't, it beeps at you in an annoying way. And that's probably pretty good, right? We're always aiming for some happy medium. And, you can think about the various ways we've all dealt with COVID over the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And there are, Shanghai, people were locked in their homes for 2 months. That's one extreme. There are some states where you're required to have a rave every night, and that's another extreme. And we're trying to reach some happy medium in all these things.
So I was trying to think of an example of like a nudge that I might give myself in my daily life. And the one I thought of, which I'm curious if you think it counts, is so I am learning how to play the ukulele. I got one just a couple months ago now. And my friend who went to the guitar store with me was like, you got to leave it out. Because if you leave it out in some place where you can see it when you're sitting on the couch and you want to watch TV, you're that much more likely to pick up the ukulele and play it, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, than to, if you have to like dig it out of your closet or whatever. Does that count?
Yeah, sure, because it's the opposite of things we all know, that we don't leave bags of candy around if we're trying to lose a little weight, or if somebody's trying to quit drinking, they get all the booze out of the house. So you don't want reminders of the temptations of stuff you want to do less of. And you do want reminders of things that you want to do more of. So yes, I think that counts.
I love that. So what about in your own life? Have you found yourself nudging yourself in certain directions?
Yeah, but not very successfully. So, I will say early in my career, I learned that the life of an academic, the great thing is freedom. You almost never have to do anything other than teach your class. They really do expect you to show up there.
Yeah.
And assign grades and things like that. But nobody's telling you which papers to write or how to go about it. And one thing I learned is submit a paper to a conference that's going to be 9 months from now. And then at some point you're going to panic and think, oh my God, I've got to present this paper. I better get to work. So, and again, it's just like the flip side. What I now know is never accept an invitation to any conference 9 months from now, because there's the what we call the empty calendar illusion.
Yep. It's funny you say that, because that happened for me with this tonight. When I was asked, I can't remember how, but I was like, oh yeah, June 7th, like great. Yeah, I'd be happy to do it. That sounds really interesting.
When Amy trapped me into doing it. There was nothing on my calendar this week.
Right, yeah.
And the meeting this afternoon with a PhD student who's defending next week, that wasn't on my calendar. And we nudge ourselves all the time and the people around us, and we gradually learn to cope with, we have calendar reminders, and now people know that if it doesn't get on my calendar, I'm gonna forget it.
Well, I do love, I know like there's something really helpful, at least for me, about the anxiety before a deadline as well. Like that's an important part of the process, is the like, oh God, I said I would, I have to interview this person at 11:30 tomorrow morning. I haven't done the prep yet. When am I gonna start doing the prep? Like once I get just anxious enough, then I'll probably start, and it'll be really efficient once I do.
Yeah, so you need a little of that.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about the idea between nudging for good and nudging for evil? Because theoretically, there's potential for both in this structure, right?
So, this is sort of a continuation of the theme that we've been just talking about, that it's the same idea, putting the ukulele out, but not the candy. So all the tools can be used for good or evil. There's a figure in the new and final edition of Nudge. The publishers fought me tooth and nail. They didn't like this idea of the final edition. I think it's funny, but it is the final edition. My co-author is confused on this front, but it is the final edition. But we have a ballot from when Adolf Hitler was running for whatever his title was, and there was a Hitler and a big yes, and then I think maybe nothing else, or a tiny little no. So, that's a pretty powerful nudge, and not necessarily for good. So a few years ago, I coined the term sludge for evil nudging. And I think this is the first scientific term that was coined on Twitter. And so it's spelled #sludge. And my pet bit of sludge is organizations, and thankfully this does not include WBEZ, that make it easy for you to subscribe, like during your pledge drive, but then difficult to unsubscribe. And that includes some of my favorite news sources. Here's a trick. If you want to unsubscribe to any magazine or newspaper, change your address to California.
Really?
Just change your address to California on their website.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah.
Because California passed a law saying you have to be able to unsubscribe the way you subscribe.
Wow.
So there's a little life hack. I've been trying to convince several newspapers to change this policy, but it's profitable. Gyms are notorious for making it difficult. I heard about one gym in the middle of the pandemic that was requiring people to come to the gym in person to fill out some forms to leave. So that's sludge. And there are all kinds of nasty business practices that are profitable, at least in the short run, but I think are inappropriate. And I try to, you don't run your students' lives after they graduate or even before, but I try to encourage people to run a business that people will want to stay involved in, and let them be free to leave. So I'm sure if you join WBEZ next week and then hear this interview the following week and say, I want to get out of that, it will be easy to do so.
So here's a question from Ben in Singapore. Ben wanted to know, do you believe that unhealthy nudges created by companies that unconsciously push the user to make bad decisions, which we could call sludge in this context, should be outlawed?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Ben. God, a question from Singapore. This is, we're reaching.
There's someone in Finland, too, later on. It's great.
So, the idea for Nudge, the idea for the book and for the concept was that let's see how much we can improve the world without requiring anyone to do anything. And now, that's not to say we should limit ourselves to nudges.
Okay.
And so, for example, climate change, I think we need a carbon tax, a big one. I don't think and it has to be global. I don't think there's any hope of solving that crisis unless people see the right prices. So I'm still an economist. Here, if you're going to ban something, so what counts? So there is the notorious Cinnabon.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Now, I believe a Cinnabon is 900 calories, which is like, what, a third of your recommended daily
Well, that's
intake.
fine. If you have it for breakfast, you still have lunch and dinner then,
Right, there you go. So,
Yeah, 3 a day.
yeah, that is all the food groups, right? Cinnamon,
Yeah.
sugar.
A lot of spinach in there for sure.
So they famously pump out the aroma into the airport when people walk by. So that's marginal.
Yeah, is that a nudge or is that sludge?
Well, I'll let somebody else decide. But, let's suppose that somebody has a pizza shop with a wood-burning oven and there's all kinds of great smells coming out, and we want to say that's illegal. If there's a place playing music, do we, like the Grant Park Music Festival that Amy loves, you can hear it from somewhere else in the park. That's not bothering anybody. It might nudge them to come over. I think that's fine. So there are no hard and fast rules of where we should draw the lines. But I try to say, let's see how far we can get with no mandates and no bans.
And when you say no mandates, you're talking about the idea is to not force people, but also not to make corporations or businesses or governments have to do anything either.
Well, I mean,
In the context of a nudge.
yeah. So look, if we think about automobiles, there are lots of safety requirements that have been legislated.
Yeah.
And for example, all new cars now have a rear camera. Now that saves the lives of maybe 100 kids a year, and it makes cars all a little more expensive. So, some people will say people should make up their own mind about whether they want a camera as an accessory. I think it's fair to say people shouldn't make up their own mind about running over kids. So, but, I don't know where to stop. Cass, my co-author of Nudge, served in the first years of the Obama administration as the head of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. President Obama had a different job in mind for Cass. And Cass said, well, Mr. President, what I would really like is to be the director of OIRA. And Obama was new to the job and said, what's that? But it's the most important job you've never heard of in Washington. Every new regulation has to get a stamp of approval from that office. So lots of these rules, Cass and the other people who have had that job are sort of controlling, and one administration versus another will set different bars, but I'm not saying there should be no rules and no mandates, but when necessary, we should do it.
So you got to some of John in Chicago's question, but there's a little more to it that I think is pretty interesting. So we're going to do it. John says the world is facing incredibly urgent challenges: wars, famine, climate change, and in the US, mass shootings. Can Nudge offer solutions to these complex yet pressing issues, or are we limited in applying behavioral economics to the micro level at personal decisions like choices on 401k savings and organ donation? It's a big question.
So I think nudge is part of the answer to every problem and not the complete answer to any problem. And if we take climate change, like I was saying, I think we should have a carbon tax. Sweden has one, and it's worked wonders, and it has not ruined their economy. California sort of has one, and same goes. There are nudges that can help. When you get your electric bill and they tell you how much your bill is compared to your neighbor's, that reduces utilization about 2 or 3%. So is that going to get us to net zero? No. But, we mentioned this in the book, as President Obama used to say, better is good.
Yeah, yeah.
So if we get 2% here, 2% there, that all helps. And, on guns, look, I think there's no place in our society for these automatic weapons. They're only designed to kill people. And, my interpretation, I'm not the constitutional lawyer in the team, but my interpretation of the Constitution is the right to bear muskets. And I'd say anybody who wants a musket,
Can have a musket.
can have a musket. And I think you should be free to carry a musket,
They're probably pretty heavy, huh?
I think they're heavy, and I think they're not. It's hard, right? I mean, now I don't think you should be able to hit people with it, but so that's not nudging. That's saying there, and you're not allowed to have a tank. You're not allowed to have chemical weapons. There are lots of things you're just not allowed to have. And I think the kind of weapons that are used in these mass shootings should just be illegal, as they are in many other countries. But there are nudge kind of solutions for people who want to have a gun in the house. First thing, when somebody says they want to have a gun in their house because they want to be safe, the thing I remind them is most likely use of that gun is somebody in your household commits suicide. Mm-hmm. There are way more suicides than homicides. And gun is the most successful. Lots of people try to commit suicide and fail, fortunately. But if you point a gun at your head, you're likely to be successful. If somebody insists on having a gun in their house, it must be locked. And so many people have died by finding a gun lying around, So I think you can, there's a professor in the Harris School, Jens Ludwig, who has done some research, some with Sendhil Mullainathan, who's part of our group. And many crimes are committed in sort of a brief moment of rage. And if we can just slow people down a little bit and not have a weapon handy, they will do less harm. So yes, we should ban some things, and we should make it harder, make it as hard as we can. Let's add a bunch of sludge to the process of buying a gun, especially a big gun.
So you mentioned your book, Nudge. What do you call the original edition? The incomplete, the non-final edition?
Yeah,
the incipient edition, the imperfect edition.
The somewhat wrong, somewhat out of date. We had what we thought was a brilliant solution to the problem of same-sex marriage, which was.
Well, and let's start and just say, so this came out in 2009, the imperfect edition.
The imperfect edition.
And,
came out
a
in
lot
2009.
has changed in the world.
A lot has changed.
Since 2009.
Yeah,
Fair
so,
to say.
our solution was clever, but just making it legal, that was better. So I don't think that chapter really, we needed anymore. And there was other stuff that, this was our pandemic project. The publisher just wanted to come out with some new edition, and thought maybe we would write 3 pages about COVID.
And just tack it on the front and call
tack
it a day.
on the front, and it would be new, revised, and but this was April 2020.
Oh, yeah.
And there
No.
was nothing to do. And, Cass was locked in his house in Lexington, Massachusetts. And I spent part of the year in Berkeley, and I was there, and so the fingers started working, and it's now, it's about 60% new. We never intended that to happen, but we got carried away a bit, but I'm pretty happy with it.
I'm just so fascinated by that revision process, given the fact that it had already existed in the world. That's not a thing that you see happen very often with a book. Much more commonly, it's what you were describing, where, you write a new foreword and you say, things have really changed. Most of this is still relevant. You're welcome. I'm curious, was there a point at which you said, okay, if we end up revising more than 75% of this book, we're just writing a new book and calling it Nudge 2? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, our publisher assured us that we were crazy and that they couldn't think of anyone who had been dumb enough to ever do this. So, but we added a new elephant. So, like the cover has a third elephant.
There you go. Okay.
And, that was a nudge, right? To say to people, it's
different.
This is a new one. And, Cass and I had some fights because there were chapters he was attached to. But, they say, you gotta kill your darlings. I don't know who's responsible? Is that Faulkner or somebody?
Sounds like something Faulkner
Some
would
wise
say.
person said you gotta kill so we killed a lot of darlings.
So Thomas in Houston had a question about the book, which was, what, if anything, do you feel you and Cass misunderstood or didn't get correct with the final edition?
Nothing. It's perfect.
I mean, it is the final edition.
It's the final edition. It has to be perfect. So, no, nothing.
Okay, great. Well, next question. At what point is there another book about Nudge? Or I don't know. I guess I'm questioning the final edition thing. I get why you need it to be the final edition for your own sanity.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious. I don't know. Are you thinking about writing another book about something entirely different?
No, but Cass will.
Okay.
He's written 5 books about Nudge, other than Nudge, and he probably has 3 in the works. So. There will be other Sunstein books, but there will not be another Thaler book that has the word nudge in the title.
Okay, that's a very specific promise.
Yeah,
and
you can hold me to it.
And I believe you. Yeah, okay. Let's see. You talked a little bit about behavioral science in the policymaker space, at least a little bit in terms of what Cass was doing with the Obama administration. But I think the nudge unit is fascinating. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, so the first one was in London, and it came about. This was when David Cameron was elected, and he was sort of a moderate conservative. Remember when we had moderate Republicans? And that's an extinct species now. But it's a moderate Tory is getting somewhat extinct as well. But anyway, he was elected, and one of the young guys working for him had read Nudge and had bought like all 10 copies that were sent by the publisher to London and piled them up on a desk in the Conservative Party headquarters. And Cameron picked one up, like the ukulele. And
just like that.
Just like that. So they put in their manifesto, which is like a party platform, that if they were elected, they would apply behavioral science principles to public policy. And I figured, yeah, that's like the party platforms here that nobody ever looks at again. But a week after they were elected, I get this call, okay, so we're doing this thing. And of course, nobody had any idea how to do that or what to do. But they found a perfect guy to run it, a guy called David Halpern, who was a social psychologist and a professor at Cambridge, but who had worked for Tony Blair, so kind of knew his way around London and Westminster. And it started out, it was 5 or 6 people. And I flew over there a couple times, and we would go around talking to various ministers and say, what's your biggest problem? And then try to think of whether there was some way to help a little, and if so, whether there was a way to test. One famous example was we met a guy whose job it was to collect money from people who owed on their taxes. And he said, that's what his job is. Can we help? And we said, well, what do you do? And we said, we send them a letter. So, can we see the letter? So they showed us the letter. We said, yeah, it's possible. There would be a way to write a better letter. And so they ended up running experiments with lots of different phrasing. And the winning formulation, they didn't try everything, but the one that worked best was, you are in the minority of people who have not paid their taxes on time. 90% of all taxpayers pay their taxes on time. You're in the minority. And taxes in Chicago, where you live, are being used to Grant Park and what have you. And that speeded up tax payments within the first 6 weeks. I don't remember by how much, but that's free money, right? You send out exactly this. The letter doesn't cost any more to send, same postage. And so there are now, they have 200 employees. There are 400 of these units around the world. The last time somebody counted, there's one in Chicago that Bloomberg helps pay for. And I could spend all of my time going around from nudge unit to nudge unit, but I've kicked them all out of the nest.
That's funny, because that language around tax collection kind of sounds a lot like what we do in our fundraising drives.
Yeah, and I think that there would be a way to improve those fundraising drives.
Okay, let's talk about it. That's an interesting
I had a
one.
conversation with, now I'm having a senior moment, the hidden brain guy.
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
Now you're having, all right, what's his name?
Shankar Vedantam. Thank you.
So I went to Washington for some national fundraising thing and did a show with him.
Oh, nice.
And we talked about that. And yeah, make it easy.
Yes, make it easy. Well, so the other thing that you talked about a lot in Nudge that we haven't really talked about today that I think is really important is make it fun.
Absolutely. we can do a lot more of that. So, there's a clip, maybe many of you have probably seen, of a subway station in Stockholm where they installed a musical staircase. And if people go up, you make music, and it's fun. And so people walk instead of use the escalator. Now, that's not very practical, but I wrote a little piece in the New York Times about this, and I got a letter from some guy who worked in LA in an office that was on 3 levels. And so they put stuff in the stairwell, like music. There were, I think, this was back in the, what was it? Before the iPhone, the iPod.
iPod, yeah.
They put an iPod
Rest
in
in
the
peace.
stairwell. Everybody got to nominate 2 songs. And they put places where you could draw stuff, and people used the stairs more often. So yeah, we can, and this has great application to kids. There's lots of things in school that we could improve the educational process just by making it more fun. Kids will play games for an infinite number of hours as long as you don't tell them it's learning.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can you talk a little bit about how Mindworks fits into that? Because it seems like, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of that situation also, right? Is to get people to participate in these different experiments by tricking them into thinking they're games, which they are.
So the idea of Mindworks is to show people that the stuff we study applies to them. And for years, the course I've taught on managerial decision making, I begin by, well, now we do a survey online before the class starts, and show the class, look, here's a question, here's the right answer, here's what subjects in the experiments do, and here's what you do. And it's the same. And so in Mindworks, you get to participate in a few studies, and the same stuff works on you. And it's fun. So, and then while you're there, if you want to be a subject in an experiment, that's fun too.
How many people in this room are familiar with Mindworks? Okay,
Wow.
great. There are a lot of hands up.
This is
That's
the
wonderful.
home crowd.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, there's kind of nothing like it, right?
No, there's nothing like it, and it's on Michigan Avenue. If you've heard of that street, right? Right across the street from the Art Institute, right next to Symphony Hall. So it's easy to find, and it's a fun place to visit.
You mentioned starting the final edition of Nudge during the pandemic. Do you think the pandemic changed how you think about nudging at all? I mean, I think about how much decision fatigue I've experienced when it comes to risk mitigation over the last 2 years and some change, and I was wondering if that has kind of reframed anything for you, just given what we've all been through.
Well, I don't know. The thing I've been thinking about more recently about the pandemic is how much life is going to be different because we were all forced to experiment. Some more than others. So lots of people moved.
Right.
And they moved because they could or because they had to, right? So maybe they moved because a family member needed help with childcare, or they moved to Montana because all of a sudden they're working from home, and
If you
why-
don't have to be in New York or Chicago or LA.
Right, you can be anywhere. And so now lots of companies have decided they're just not going to have an office anymore. I don't think many of them would have ever come to that without being forced to try it. Now, I don't think that's for everybody. Who here liked hybrid classes?
We got one hand up.
One liar in the back.
Well, I think there's a big difference between hybrid and either online or in person, right?
You're speaking to the converted
okay.
on that matter. But I think now if we're going to have a conversation, I'm having. The default is you do it by Zoom. So, well, that's more human. We're going to have a lot less travel. That's good, right? Climate change. I mean, people would think nothing of flying across the country for a 1-hour meeting because it was an important client and you had to show that you cared. Well, I think we all realize now those meetings are just stupid. But personally, I hope and pray that at the University of Chicago in Booth, we are 100% back to normal because part of the magic of being a faculty member there is it's a very intense, alive environment. And if I have some question about almost any topic, I can just walk down the hall and get an answer. And if people are all back home in their offices, in their home offices, that's my main research method is out the window. So I think I was saying earlier that part of the job of an academic is a lonely one, but the most fun part is talking to your colleagues and your students and interacting and brainstorming. And let's hope that we're back to that in September.
Well, it's true. There is such a magic to that unstructured time, too. It's often not even in a meeting where you end up having
absolutely.
the moment that
so-called
really gets you
water
thinking.
cooler moments.
Right.
Those are important.
Yeah. I really don't miss going into the office, I have to say. I find it really nice to work from home most of the time.
And it's clear there are lots of jobs that people can do better from home, and commuting in Chicago is no fun, and it's gotten a lot worse. That was the one thing that improved during the pandemic is traffic. So I wonder whether we need something less life-threatening than the pandemic to just force us to try new things. And I think it's great that some people will be able to have a job and not leave home. I think there are great opportunities for getting some people back into the labor force, especially mothers of young children who are often would like to work part-time, and the business community has not been very imaginative in figuring out how to make that happen. And maybe this will shake that up a little bit.
So yeah, what do you think of a 40-hour work week? Can we get rid of that?
There's a great line by a former prime minister of Israel. And they have a 5.5-day work week.
Oof.
And he said, was asked once, what do you think about a 5-day work week? And he said, slowly, slowly, let's get up to 4. So.
Okay, fair enough. So we have just a couple minutes left. I want to get to a couple of audience questions. One is from Chris in Edgewater here in Chicago. Chris said, I loved your cameo in The Big Short. Do you have any plans to return to the silver screen? And who, between you and Selena Gomez, is the better card player? It's a 2-part question.
Okay, so Adam McKay, I don't know where you are, that was your best movie, I think you need me. He hasn't called, As to card play, I can testify that Selena Gomez did not know the rules of blackjack.
Oh, wow.
And the way I know that is in the script, which our little scene bears no real resemblance to. But in the script, she gets dealt 21, which wins.
Mm-hmm. That's how that game works, yeah.
She did not react. So, that was take 1. And I said, okay, Selena, I have to explain this to you. This is good. And there is a scene of us high-fiving. I should get McKay won Best Screenplay, Best Director. I think I should get like the finger on the Oscar or some. So yeah, no, Selena did not know blackjack nor collateralized debt obligations, but she could memorize lines, which
there
I
you go.
couldn't.
Yeah,
so
those are,
we were a good team.
It's different skill sets.
Yeah, right. She's younger too.
So this question is pretty specific, but I do think it's an interesting one. This is from Mike in New York. Mike says, I teach AP Economics to high school students, and much of the AP curriculum does not include anything on behavioral economics. What would you suggest as a good entry point to incorporate behavioral economics into high school economics courses?
I wrote this other book called Misbehaving.
Nice.
I think there's a lot of stuff you could steal from that. I'll say one short thing about that, which is behavioral economics has made tremendous inroads in research and in top economics departments. So every major journal has behavioral economics papers. It has not made it into basic introductory textbooks.
Why do you think that is?
It's because it complicates the story.
Oh, we do that in journalism too.
And so 3 of my booth colleagues have an intermediate micro book and it has a behavioral economics chapter, and they've told me it's the most controversial chapter because half the students love it and half the students say, hey, wait a minute, you're telling this, because it's always the last chapter.
Sure.
What about all those other chapters where you had the indifference curves and people were optimizing, and so it complicates the story, and so we'll have to wait for that.
So to be determined then? We'll see what comes out?
Yeah. People write new textbooks all the time. I think the way I used to teach the basic micro class early on, and the way I taught it was, look, this is a theory of how you should behave, and this is what people do. And, you know, in my decision-making class, I have this list of rules that people should follow. And one is ignore sunk costs, but assume no one else does. And that's the way I teach economics.
Well, Richard, thank you very much for taking the time, and thanks to all of you for coming this evening. This was great.